Don't forget, some things mustn't be forgotten. The shadow hunting me. I must hurry. My name is Daniel. I live in London at Mayfair. What have I done? This is crazy. Don't forget. Don't forget. I must stop him. Focus. My name is... I am Daniel.
This is how Amnesia: The Dark Descent opens. A game from, fuck me, it's been a long time, hasn't it? For me, this game will always be the game that one funny Swedish man played.
Did we go in here? Yeah, we did. Hi! Let's just strut my way.
And yes, that's exactly where I picked up the terrible habit of screaming Swedish curse words when I get scared. It's entirely his fault. But despite watching this game countless times with many playthroughs throughout the year, I've somehow never actually played an Amnesia game myself, which is wild considering how beloved the series is for most fans of horror games in general, and actually how influential it is to the horror genre itself. So I decided it was finally time to fix that issue and pop the proverbial cherry on this franchise, and I decided I wanted to dive into the games, potentially all of them at some point, and see firsthand what made this game specifically such a groundbreaking horror experience. And most importantly, does Amnesia: The Dark Descent still hold up all these years later? When we actually begin the game, we get a little intro cutscene, where the words from Daniel you just heard at the beginning of this video are from. It gives us a clear direction of what the game is going to be about, and that we are a man called Daniel who lived at Mayfair, which I'm sorry, and he is being hunted by a shadow. But also we need to stop a man from doing something and redeem ourselves. Now fading in from black, we are instantly dragged into the world of Amnesia, and man, this game's atmosphere fucks. This is an aspect of the game itself which I instantly fell in love with. It's atmospheric perfection. The way it uses its atmosphere and how it utilizes atmospheric horror is amazing. The blowing of the wind, the whistling of it, the pouring of water through cracks in the wall, the thunder outside that makes you jump when you're just walking about, and the creaks of floorboards as you're walking around the castle itself are amazing. Even later in the game, the distant screams that you hear inside the prison area or the clanking of chains tell a story in and of itself and make the game so much more scary than it actually is. This is one of the only games that I've actually ever played in general that has kept me on edge the whole time. Most horror games to me fail at being what I call a good horror game, making me feel uncomfortable playing them. I often get to a point where I feel completely fine playing them. Think Resident Evil when you start getting the mechanics down, or Dead Space, or any game where you get a gun halfway through and it trivializes the game completely. Amnesia doesn't do this. Amnesia uses its atmosphere to full effect and ensures that you never get too comfortable with the game, throwing enough curveballs at you just to ensure that you never feel quite comfortable with the game. Now, if you notice in the gameplay, it looks very, and I mean very blurry. I thought the motion blur was just messed up because a lot of older games, especially from the mid 2010s, have issues with motion blur when you apply higher frame rates to them and things like that. So I thought there was actually a problem with the game, but no, this is fully intentional. The blurriness is meant to reflect to your sanity level, and the more blurry the game is, the more insane you're going within the game, which is such a cool aspect to the game and will obviously be used a lot more to present our characters' feelings of a certain moment or certain things we find. Slowly making our way through the castle, following the blood trail, we find a room with 3 paintings and we meet the shadow itself. The shadow seems to be an otherworldly thing, as I interpreted it. It is something which a human man cannot comprehend, so we can't see it, but basically it's kind of like death from Final Destination. It follows you around and makes your life annoying as hell, making noises, opening doors, or attack. It is generally just a nuisance to you. You're never fully threatened by it, but the idea of what it could do to you will definitely keep you moving forward. And I do like how this game does this. Horror games often have the problem where if you back up and stop moving, the game loses all the horror, because the horror aspects like the jump scares or the chase sequences, for example, they rely on the player to keep moving forward. So if we have something behind us that's pushing us forward and we have that idea that if we don't move forward fast enough we will get caught by it, this is here to push us forward into that horror, making the game feel even more uneasy and telling you that no matter where you've been and checked, there can always be things that are different. The shadow might hunt you there. Making our way to the old archives, we get some quotes on screen in the loading screen, and these quotes, there are a lot of them, but they do tell a good amount of backstory and general story stuff for the game itself. At first they seem random, as what the fuck do Turkish delights have to do with anything, but these quotes give an insight into Daniel's past himself. These are repressed memories that are re-emerging as we're going through the game. We recover them each time we load into a new area, which is cool to see. Now each area has its own set of quotes, so I'll bring them up as they come along, but I'm not going to talk about each of them in full detail because there's a lot of them and there's also a lot of notes I need to cover, so we'll try to keep it brief with these ones specifically. So each section basically tells a mini story which is designated by their background. So the first one is called the Rose quotes, but these basically outline Daniel's childhood. It also outlines him attacking another boy with a rock, then this leads to him being punished by what I assume is his father, with him being kicked in the stomach and his sister Hazel hiding from his father as this was being done to him. But also the taste of Rose reminding him of Turkish delights is a bit odd. At first I thought it might be his favourite childhood sweet, but he talks about a place in Turkey. He talks about Constantinople, which is an ancient city which we now call Istanbul, a city in Turkey. And to me, this tells us that Daniel did travel the world a lot, because if he knows of this place and he knows of Turkish delights from there, it means he's been there before. So I think this specific quote is from later in his life. And the last one has Daniel traveling to Dover, a place in the UK, and he makes sure to visit his family to avoid neglecting that relationship, showing that he has a distant relationship with them, but he's willing to basically put their differences aside to maintain their relationship. This obviously indicates to us that Daniel did not have the easiest childhood, which we see by him getting kicked in the stomach. Daniel's upbringing now, it will explain things that he will do in the future and explain certain issues that he has with himself, which I'll get to in a bit. Now, actually entering the archives, we slowly make our way through with the darkness messing with us, and we get our main tool for the entire game. This item will be your best friend for the entirety of the game, allowing you to maintain your sanity no matter where you are and whenever you need it. But I guess we should talk about the inventory screen now that we have the final thing that we needed to basically collect before I could talk about it. Amnesia is a very interesting game, as you don't have like one or two things that you have to manage that most games have. Think Outlast with health and batteries, or any other horror game that has multiple things that you have to manage, like Resident Evil with health and ammo. Amnesia has 4 things that you need to manage at all times. One is obviously your physical health, represented by the heart in the top left. This will naturally recover over time, but obviously you can use an item called a laudanum, which will allow you to basically recover health instantly. Of course, if this gets to 0, you die. That's how every game works. Next is the brain, and this is your sanity. And this one thing is what makes Amnesia super cool to me. There are 4 stages of sanity. First is a clear consciousness. There is nothing wrong with you. Then there's the slight headache stage. Basically stand in the dark or look at an enemy, you get to this point. Your sanity starts to slip. Then you get to head is pounding and hands are shaking stage. Stage 3. This is obviously indicating that your mental stability is declining rapidly and you need to do something to prevent you from reaching the 4th and final stage. ... This stage is when Daniel is starting to go insane. At this point, Daniel will start to hallucinate enemies in the game, and his vision begins to distort to varying degrees. Now, if you're in hard mode, once you reach this stage, you will die. If you let your sanity drop too far, you just die instantly. What I really like about this is Daniel actually hallucinates physical enemies that you can see in game. Now, these enemies can't actually hurt you, they are there just to put you on edge and mess with your head even more. Enemies are inconsistent in this game, I'll say that much. They spawn whenever they feel like spawning, and when you see one just spawn off in the distance and walk into a room, it now makes you question if you want to go in that room yourself. You start questioning your own actions, almost like the player themselves are going insane, and I really do like that, and it's such a cool mechanic to implement into this game. To me, this is a perfect execution of horror itself. People who aren't used to horror games in general and will freak out at the sight of an enemy will now be put on edge and will completely halt their progress because they believe they saw an enemy. And obviously, if you enter the room that the enemy entered, they're not there. So it makes you question your own actions and question what you can believe yourself. Next is
lamp oil.
Oil is used to ensure you can light up your own lantern, but finding oil is, let's say, less than common. Oil will run out pretty quickly if you leave your lantern on for as long as you can keep it on. You only have a few minutes worth of light from your lantern at any times, so you need to ensure that you're using it effectively. The lantern, in my opinion, is the best way to maintain your sanity. If you want to avoid sitting in the dark, you just press one button and you bring the lantern up, ensuring that your sanity does not decrease anymore. But as I stated, oil is pretty limited, so you can't always rely on it. But even if you run out of oil, don't worry, there are still ways to maintain your sanity. One is natural light. Certain areas will just be naturally lit up. For example, windows, for example, have natural moonlight coming in, which will help maintain your sanity, or some rooms already are lit up with candles or lanterns or other things like that, which will help maintain your sanity. But there is also the fourth item you need to basically maintain.
What do you think?
Tinderboxes are the fourth resource that you have to collect and find around the map, and they allow you to light certain things up. Candles on desks, wall torches, furnaces, anything that you can light with a match, you can light up with a tinderbox. These light sources are basically permanent light sources. You can pick and choose where you want to light them, and they allow you to basically recover your sanity without the use of a lantern or a natural light source. While they're not perfect, and you will never feel like you have enough tinderboxes to light up every single light source you find, you obviously have to tactically use them alongside your lantern to ensure that your sanity never drops too low. So you have to make sure that you balance the two, making sure you never run out of tinderboxes or oil, as if you ever find yourself in a position where you've run out of one, you can rely on the other. This will allow you to effectively get around the castle and the dungeon that precedes after it. Fully following the trail, we find a note on the table, and reading it,
19th of August, 1839. I wish I could ask how much you remember. I don't know if there will be anything left after I consume this drink. Don't be afraid, Daniel. I can't tell you why, but know this. I choose to forget. Try to find comfort and strength in that fact. There is a purpose. You are my final effort to put things right. God willing, the name Alexander of Brandenburg still invokes bitter anger in you. If not, this will sound horrible. Go to the inner sanctum, find Alexander, and kill him. His body is old and weak, and yours, young and strong. He will be no match for you. One last thing. A shadow is following you. It's a living nightmare, breaking down reality. I have tried everything, and there is no way to fight back. You need to escape it as long as you can. Redeem us both, Daniel. Descend into the darkness where Alexander waits and murder him. Your former self, Daniel.
This note outlines and reinforces what we heard earlier. For example, that we need to kill a man. This man is called Alexander, and his body is old and weak, telling us that he is an old man. Pretty obvious. But Daniel is scared of something that the Daniel of the past will not disclose to us. He explains that he chose to forget it, and that itself should give us some closure about the decision, basically making us his final effort to right a wrong that he did. But he will not tell us this wrong. But previous us does tell us that the shadow is still following us, so that isn't the subject matter that he tried to forget and does not want us to remember. And he tells us that it breaks down reality, and he has tried everything he can think of in the past to try kill it or stop it, and nothing has worked. So the one piece of advice he gives to us, and our best option, is to just outrun it. But we must descend the darkness of the castle to find Alexander, and we must murder him to redeem ourselves. I wonder what we did where we feel the need to redeem ourselves. I wonder how far our previous self delved into the darkness. This note in general is very interesting to me. It obviously entices you into the game more, laying that narrative bread trail for you, but it doesn't give too much away. It gives you a clear goal that you need to do, kill Alexander, and it tells you what you need to avoid, the shadow. And you know what? I think I can do that. It obviously sort of encourages you to keep going, something that you definitely need in horror games. Opening a secret passageway, we can now enter the entrance hall, and this area will act as the first puzzle area for the game.
Alexander, is it inside the castle?
In a manner of speaking. Come, bring the lamp. You've been to the refinery, have you not?
I don't believe I have. Is it connected to the... what did you call it?
The inner sanctum. My most precious chamber, Daniel. and it lies well beyond the refinery. In fact, it lies beneath the very stone of Brennenburg.
Trying to head down these stairs, it is blocked off by a red fleshy substance created by the shadow itself. And now exploring, we have to find a way to get rid of this fleshy substance off the door so we can progress further. Certain doors have the same substance that blocks us off if we try to enter them, and some of them are just locked. So we are eventually guided into the laboratory in which the shadow keeps messing with us. Never out. And in one of the rooms we find a couple more notes. Chemical relocation. The lack of a chimney to properly vent the fumes from my most recent experiments has taken its toll on many of my less stable ingredients in storage. Some seem unaffected, but many are stained by the fumes and will be difficult to salvage. I shall do what I can and move them to the wine cellar. Early alchemy experiment. This is my third attempt to produce artificial vitae. The former compounds lack the potency I need, but I sense I'm close. Calamine and orpiment are given, and the cuprite binds them well. This time I'll attempt aqua regia instead of aqua fortis, in hope it will produce a more even solution. The experiment was unsuccessful. The solution is highly acid and proves impractical to put to any use as a detergent. Organic tissue reacts especially violently to the solution and should be handled with the greatest care. I might be able to use the recipe, but I'm losing hope that I'll find an alchemic solution to my predicament. One outlines where ingredients are kept and talk about people being moved to the wine cellars, and the other mentions something called vitae and other materials like calamine, orpiment, and cuprite, and it's a highly acidic solution created from the fall. This acid can then burn organic tissue, obviously outlining to us what we need to create in order to progress past the fleshy substance blocking our path. So basically we have to run around and find these ingredients and then create this acid. So first we head to the archive and we find a contract for Wilhelm. I hereby offer my full attention and services to Alexander, Baron of Brennenburg. This contract will run for a total of 3 years when my freedom shall return to me. In addition, Alexander, Baron of Brennenburg, is to recommend my services at the Prussian royal court and within the sanctum of the Order of the Black Eagle. May no man break this seal. Wilhelm, House of Gerrick. Basically, this Wilhelm offered his services to Alexander and something called the Order of the Black Eagle. But we also learn that Alexander is a Baron of Brennenburg, and after he has finished his services for Alexander, he hopes that he's recommended to the Prussian royal family by Alexander. This clearly shows the level of influence that Alexander has, as he has direct connections and influence over the royal family themselves. But more interestingly, in this area are Daniel's diary entries labeled Algeria, which outline previous events in the game and in his life that fill in the blanks of Daniel's missing memories and clues us in to what the game's actually about. And this is where most of the game's story is told, in his diary entries. So I guess we have to go through them all.
16th of May, 1839. The unflinching African sun has continued to plague our expedition, making it impossible to dig until dusk. How Professor Herbert managed to find the location in these vast plains of nothingness remains a mystery to me. When I asked him about the tomb again, he told me about the legend of Tin Hanan, the mother of us all. An interesting story in its own right, but I can't help feeling there's more. Later that evening, we uncovered a passage beneath the dunes leading to a sand-covered stone structure. The professor was confident it was the tomb we sought and ordered the others to clear the way late into the dark, cold night. Tomorrow, I shall lead the men into the ancient structure, hoping to reach the burial chamber. No matter what the professor is keeping from me, the dig should yield something interesting to take back to London and the British Museum.
This first diary entry outlines an expedition out in Algeria, with Daniel and a group of men he brought along with him digging into a tomb looking for things to steal and bring back to the British Museum. A true Englishman. Take what doesn't belong to us and then never give it back when we put it in our museums. Truly a patriot. The next entry.
17th of May, 1839. My hands tremble as I write. I feel a need to document my tribulation, for I fear that my memory will fail me if I linger. Today, I took some men and ventured into the dark, ancient passage we uncovered. Our torches burned faintly in the murky air as we slowly made our way underground. The men were superstitious and fearful. They argued loudly, and I felt their strange language getting to me. I mustered my strength and yelled at them to continue down the slopes and broken steps. The crudely carved passage confused me. It looked much older than the 4th century structure we had expected. The twisting path emerged into a great antechamber. The walls were lined with statues unlike any I'd ever seen. Despite their unearthly quality, I felt a strange familiarity toward them, which haunts me still. At the far end of the chamber, a great slab of stone sealed off whatever lay ahead. I gave the order to raise it, and as I pushed through the narrow space, the heavy stone suddenly dropped, sealing me inside. I was trapped.
This outlines the expedition's progress, with Daniel progressing further into the tomb with his group, but the men of his group became superstitious and fearful. Toughing it out, however, they came to a structure which appeared much older than what Daniel theorized to be down here. They believed that it was much older than the 4th century architecture they were expecting, and at one end of the structure a great stone slab sealed off something, with Daniel giving the order to his men to raise it up to allow him to go further. But once he went under, the stone slab suddenly dropped, trapping him within the tomb. Now, exploring the area a bit more, we eventually get...
Holy shit.
Yes, the shadow. Even if you felt comfortable now, just having forgotten about it because it's been away for about 10 minutes, its presence is made known again, and in one of the rooms we have a memory of Alexander talking about how the castle is, let's say, falling apart a bit. Something which the shadow will use to full effect to make your life a living hell, by blocking off entrances or exits that you just came from, and just making navigation a little bit more difficult. And the last entry of this diary entry labelled Algeria.
17th May, 1839. After pounding the unforgiving stone wall for what seemed like an eternity, I realized it was hopeless. I was trapped. I fell to the ground, gasping for air, trying to focus. That's when I saw a faint blue shimmer. My weakened body was heavy to carry, but I managed to push myself toward the enchanting light. It was waiting for me. Enclosed in dark nothingness, I felt myself drawn to the mystic light. I reached out, closing it in my hands. The faint glow escaped my fingers and began to spark brightly and spirit me away, unlocking alien memories of spiraling towers, endless deserts, and impossible geometry. The next thing I can remember is the grating sound of stone being lifted, the voices of the Arabs pulling me to safety, and grasped firmly in my hands was the broken pieces of a most peculiar relic.
Basically, Daniel felt like he was going to be trapped forever, and we get a glimpse at this memory with a blue shimmer in the distance which entices us forward, and this object seems to be a spherical object. When he grabbed the object, it revealed alien memories to him of spiraling towers, endless deserts, and impossible geometry. Alien obviously indicates something from another world, so what he saw was not of Earth, and the next thing he remembers is being saved by the men he brought with him on the excavation. These 3 entries outline a previous expedition Daniel was a part of in Algeria, in which he found some sort of mystical artifact linked to another world. This artifact was the shape of a sphere, an orb. In a next library-like area, we can find a note on local folklore of the area of Altstadt, the area which the castle is located in. One of these rumours being that of the Gatherers. This story reaches all the way back to the time of the 30 Years' War. It is said that soldiers who abandoned their duty got lost in the cold dark woods and were forever damned to roam the grounds. Their bodies, wrought by their tainted souls, have left them disfigured and empty of essence. Many have cited them over the years and described them as horrid revenants. They move silently through the woods, shying away from any beholder. They are called gatherers as they seem to follow some ambition to steal living creatures. It is their prey which can be heard struggling inside damp burlap sacks dragged behind them, which reveal their presence. What dark scheme do they follow? The gatherers are loyal servants to Alexander von Brennenburg. They are their namesake. They gather human beings for whatever Alexander needs for them. The gatherers themselves used to be human beings before they turned into whatever they are now due to what Alexander fed them, which is what we heard in the wine cellar. Their bones pop out their bodies, their jaws completely dislocate, their bodies completely disfigure into what we see them as now. The Baron of Brennenburg lives a reclusive life with his family at his castle nearby Altstadt, and like most those of noble birth, rumours are inherited alongside with the title. Research in the history reveals little before the castle was consumed by fire in the late 16th century. It was rebuilt by Alexander, a nobleman from the Rhinelands, claiming the role as protector of the Prussian state. Alexander helped the region to flourish and remained popular throughout his presumed lifetime. The family has always been secretive when it comes to lineage and heritage. Therefore, the birth and death of Alexander and his offspring has never been fully recorded. This has fed the idea that the Baron is in fact the one and the same who came from the West over 300 years ago, lived through the time of occupation, and joined the coveted Order of the Black Eagle, along with the great leaders of this country. The Baron of Brennenburg that we know is Alexander, and his family heritage and lineage, with their births and deaths, are not recorded. Now, interestingly, a baron called Alexander appeared in the area after a big fire that took the castle that we are currently in the 16th century, and he basically told that he was a protector of the land of Prussia. Despite what many people saw as Alexander's long reign in life as a baron over Prussia, they liked him. He helped the area and region flourish into what it is now, and his secretive life led to a rumour that the baron who appeared in the 16th century and the one that is currently ruling the place in the 18th century, they are one and the same people. They are the exact same person who came then and is still alive now, but obviously that shouldn't be possible if he is a normal man, obviously indicating to us something about the Baron that we know. Despite Alexander's long life, people in the area of Brennenburg actually did like Alexander, as he helped the region flourish into what it is now today, but his secretive life has led to a rumour that spread about him. The people believe that the Baron that appeared after the fire in the 16th century and the one that appeared in the 18th century, the apparent grandson or great-grandson of the original Baron, are one of the same people. Now, doing the puzzle in this room, we can now move on and find another note regarding the closing of the wine cellar, the same wine cellar from a previous note. Wilhelm and his fools have endangered my research long enough with their absent-minded handling of the human vessels. The sheriff is keeping a watchful eye on the forest and is killing my trusty servants. It's just a matter of time until they follow the trail to Brennenburg. I need to lock Wilhelm and his men up to avoid further investigation from the public. The wine cellar will therefore be sealed off until the matter has been handled. Either the king's men leave, or they will starve, whatever comes first. They can rot for all I care. Maybe I will feed them some wine. It would in a sense solve both my problems. It appears that Alexander got into a bit of trouble with the local law and the local community, with the king and the sheriff apparently potentially being on his arse. Now, apparently there is also a trail of something leading back to Brennenburg, so to keep himself safe from the sheriff and the king, he locked Wilhelm, the person who he had a contract with, and his men in a wine cellar to avoid further investigation from the public. Why? Well, it seems that Wilhelm and his men failed with their handling of human vessels, whatever that means. But he did treat the men to some wine, and this apparently solved an issue in and of itself, them drinking the wine, telling us that yes, the wine was poisoned. Finding a key close by, we can now leave and go to the wine cellar.
I love games that have like physics objects that you can just like bing. I love it.
Heading there.
I think I'm gonna read. What the fuck?
This is our first encounter with an actual gatherer, them being described in the rumour, the ones that were described in the rumour note, and they are terrifying looking. I really overall do like the design as monsters, the sort of more fleshy, bulging look that looks like their bones poking out, which is what is described that happens to people when they turn into these things. But I also like that the game discourages you from actually looking at them. Looking at the gatherers, you start to go insane, which obviously you don't want to do, so you're encouraged to not look at them. This simple gameplay thing makes them seem more scary than they actually are, because I'll be honest, they're dumb as shit. You can very easily outmaneuver them. But if they do spot you and they start to chase you, they actually become much harder to deal with than something like a Mr. X from Resident Evil 2. Because you have no way to actually deal with them, your only options are to run away and try to basically break line of sight, which is kind of hard in this very tight corridor-ridden castle. Returning to the entrance hall, we can now see that the shadow has caught up to us, and again reinforcing that we are being chased by this entity. And entering the wines, we've got some more quotes to go through. These quotes are referred to as the catacombs quotes, with them all detailing Daniel's time in Algeria. As we just found the diary entry, now all the memories associated with Algeria are coming back. The dry crusty lips, the lack of hydration, the way the sand fell, everything is coming back. But nothing really new is revealed with these memories. In the wine cellar,
where did the Baron go?
Who cares? He left us enough wine to last us a lifetime. Or at least until tomorrow.
yes, the people the Baron locked in the wine cellar had a bit of a boozing and a bit of schmoozing. And entering a room, we can grab cuprite, one of the items that we need to create the acid that we're making, but we also hear groaning behind us, and the door shut as well. But I was all more interested in these barrels. This is something this game does really well. Once you engage with a main gameplay part, such as a thing for a puzzle, it then throws a bit of a curveball at you by throwing in a random sound behind you and swinging a door about. There's nothing actually here that can actually hurt you, but it does sort of put you on edge and make you be wary of what's coming up, especially if you haven't played this game before. Exiting into another room, we find yet another one of the ingredients, and the shadow really does not like what we're doing, with us trying to get further into the castle. With us now being locked in the room and a barrel falling on our head, we are knocked out for a bit, but once we awaken, we have to clear the door and basically using the really fun, in my opinion, of grabbing shit and moving it around. Basically, every item in this game is a physical object that has physics to it that you can pick up and throw, which I really like. I miss when games used to do this, and it is such a breath of fresh air from what I've been playing recently, because I can't think of any new modern games that allow you to pick up and interact with almost every object in the world. Eventually clearing the door, we can find
Holy shit.
It seems that something had a bit of a scrap behind these doors, and we get another memory of the people, more specifically Wilhelm and his men.
What's happening? Oh, it feels like my chest is going to burst.
My God! Wilhelm, do something!
Accept it. We're not getting out of here.
How can you say that? Alexander, you piece of shit! Let us out of here!
They drank the wine and turned into the Gatherers. Their bones basically started to stick out their bodies and disfigure them. The Gatherers are horrific entities that basically you wouldn't wish on anyone, but something that they consume turned them into this thing. But it is heavily believed that their loss of sanity by being trapped in the wine cellar and only having wine to basically fuel them basically turned them insane, and whatever they consumed interacted in a way that turned them into the Gatherers themselves. And yes, the creaking floorboards keep freaking me out throughout this entire playthrough, so if you've ever seen the gameplay, me flick up and look at the sky, that's because I heard a creaking floorboard. I do it constantly because I always want to know where the noise is coming from. But a new note from Wilhelm.
My name is Wilhelm, House of Gerrick. These are my final words, my confession and testament. 2 years ago, I was summoned to the castle of Brennenburg. As most of the aristocracy, I was curious about what this supposed Knight of the Order could want from me and accepted the invitation. The Baron was friendly and offered me a proposition. It dawned on me that the nature of the contract was sordid and that the reason I was chosen was because of the follies of my past and not the honors I've been rewarded with during my time as a soldier. I was to kidnap healthy humans upon his slightest whim, and do so without asking questions. In return, he would attest to my character at the royal court, advancing my position within noble society. I would like to claim that I struggled with my decision, but it came swiftly, and I accepted wholeheartedly. Ever since that day, I've brought men, women, and children to Brennenburg. I can't remember the numbers, but there were many, perhaps even 100, none of whom were ever seen or heard from again. Tonight, the Baron invited me and my men down to the wine cellar to celebrate our work. I had my suspicions as we descended the stairs, but he insisted and joined us in a toast. The wine tasted fine, and my men drank without restraint. So begins the punishment for our sins. The Baron has locked us up and returned upstairs. Forgive me for what I have done. I was weak and fell into his diabolical ways. My men are screaming. Their skin has been pierced by their own tangled bones. I feel my insides revolt against their God-given nature. Blood has begun to pour from my eyes. I can no longer.
Okay, so Wilhelm was like a soul. Something's upstairs.
So Wilhelm was to kidnap healthy humans at the whim of the Baron for his reasons. He was not to ask questions about anything that the Baron was doing with these people. With hundreds of people never being seen again once brought to the castle, Wilhelm really could not do it anymore. This indicates to us that the Baron is not to be trusted, and those who drank the wine are not receiving a fun death, as this was entirely the Baron's plan to kill them. This then obviously indicates to us that can we trust the Baron himself? We're here in this castle for some reason, and Alexander seems to have betrayed Daniel in some way. So what could he possibly done with especially him kidnapping human beings? While exploring a little bit more,
My heart is going. This is actually the first game in a while that's actually creeped me out. What?
again another gatherer comes and gives me a bit of a jump scare. Finding the final ingredient we need to make the acid to burn the fleshy substance away, we return to the entrance hall and again a few more quotes. These quotes are labelled The Desert. These outline Daniel leaving Algeria and making his way back to London after what happened in the tomb, but it didn't go exactly as planned. Basically, a big commotion occurred with the French soldiers shooting two young men, and seemingly he ran away with him becoming breathless and sweating. Seemingly he wasn't entirely safe on his journey back to London, and he was meant to board a ship but didn't get on it. Leaving the cellar, the shadow takes over more of the area in the entrance hall, with more fleshy stuff entering the room. So going back to the lab, we can now make the acid, but before that, quickly in the desk we can find a memory capsule, another type of note, but these notes are specifically from Alexander. They're his memories.
One day I will return. If it wasn't for the thought of you, my love, I wouldn't be able to go on. When I find myself doing terrible things, I take comfort in you. As long as I'm able to think of you and long for a life together, I know I'm better than the others. I weep for them. They lust for power without restraint, while I only crave fair judgment and a safe return.
This shows that Alexander has a love that he is trying to return to. He has been forcibly separated from them, and he is doing these terrible things, kidnapping humans and doing whatever to them, to return to his love. But he also states that he himself is better than the humans he is kidnapping, stating that the humans he kidnaps just crave power and lust for it. But he's different. He only wants the power because he has an end goal. But in a way, he does lust for power for love. So is he any better than humans if this is exactly what he's doing? He wants the power so badly to achieve a goal, which is what almost every human who ever wants power wants. They have a goal in mind that they want to fulfill, which is why they desire power so dearly. Now, actually making the acid and collecting it in the pot, the shadow gets rather angry with us. Getting a wee bit noisy. Now, taking the pot of acid, we can burn our way through the fleshy substance blocking our path, and now we enter a brand new area, the refinery. And here we have our first real, actual sort of encounter with a gatherer. The other ones have kind of been sort of scripted events. This one's the sort of more unscripted one, a more chase part. But as I stated, the gatherers are very easy to basically manipulate. You can just walk around them, turn a corner and hide. They're very easy to form. But here we do find something interesting, another one of Daniel's diaries, but this one titled Return.
22nd of June, 1839. It's been more than a month since my last entry. After the event inside the underground chamber in Algeria, Professor Herbert insisted I return to England. He said he didn't want to risk forfeiting the entire expedition lest I took a turn for the worse. An excessive decision, in retrospect, but I'm glad it turned out that way. I found my journal this morning in the haphazard collection of things brought home from Africa. Next to it lay the broken stone orb wrapped in cloth. I tried to assemble it, but couldn't. The pieces wouldn't fit together, as if they weren't from the same object. Could I have imagined it all? Was there ever a complete orb?
So Daniel was sent back to London by Professor Herbert for his safety due to what happened in the tomb. But he did find his journal from Africa, and alongside it, the broken stone orb he found in the tomb. Trying to fix the orb, the pieces themselves did not fix together, almost as if they were completely different objects that were somewhat similar. And Daniel questions if he misremembered what the actual object was or what happened to the orb itself. This obviously highlights to us that there is something more mysterious about the orb, that it could potentially change its own form and shape. And not too much further into the refinery, we can find the second entry.
25th of June, 1839. I feel the need to continue this journal, even though it was intended for my journey to Africa. This must be something very important. I just know it. I've taken it upon myself to piece the orb back together, but it's been more difficult than one might think. The pieces are behaving strangely. They seem to change color, shape, and texture, but ever so slightly. Yesterday, I took careful measurements and notated any significant markings. Today, I confirmed my suspicions. They were changing. I was terrified and rushed off to see the finest geologist in London, Sir William Smith. I approached the subject with care, and we discussed how rocks change form. He told me about the nature of glass, how it eventually collapses on itself, like ice slowly melting over the course of centuries. Smith eased my mind a bit, but I can't escape the feeling that these shards have otherworldly properties.
So Daniel has taken the seemingly impossible task of fixing the orb and has been studying them for a while, and he has noticed that the orb changes color, shape, and texture ever so slightly, and he is starting noting down any significant characteristics that he can spot on the orb pieces. And this has allowed him to confirm his suspicions that the orb was indeed changing. Now rushing off to see Sir William Smith, yes, a real-life geologist, with him explaining that all rocks are constantly changing, using glass as an example. But the changes in this orb was having two extreme changes too quickly. Changing color, texture, size, shape, everything in the matter of days is a bit too fast for a rock in my eyes. And Daniel states as much as well, calling the orb otherworldly again. There's that word again, another world. Making our way down the hatch, we get another set of quotes. This outlines a memory of Daniel being washed out to sea, smothered in the dark Atlantic water, but something large brushed past his leg and dragged him along. But he was saved by the crew of the SS Hortensia, the boat he was meant to board in Algeria to return to London. And entering the back halls,
Fuck me.
with water on the floor, movement is what attracts whatever this creature is, an invisible beast. This beast is called the Croc, a beast we will learn a little bit more about later in notes, but they are pretty dumb and easily distracted. By throwing objects in the water, they will go to investigate them, allowing you to very easily manipulate their movement. But they only care about the player if you are physically in the water, so it allows you to sort of create your own path by picking up boxes and throw them in the water, especially later on when they start to do some cool with these enemies. The Croc, being an invisible creature, now links it to the Shadow. The Shadow is something we physically cannot see, and the Croc is the only other creature that is like this. This obviously gives them some sort of link, as the pair are unable to be perceived by the human eye. Navigating our way through the water and past the heavy gate, which seemingly squashes them, we now get an engagement with a second one, and it almost actually
Oh my god.
But escaping, we enter another area. But we just had to run from another Croc and enter the back hall. And we get to another puzzle area, needing to access the ascending room.
You have an ascending room. Will it take us to the inner sanctum?
It will definitely take care of the vertical part of our journey. So, you have ridden an elevator before?
Yes, the Colosseum at Regent's Park has one. It takes you to the gallery where you can view the panorama.
Good. This ride might be a little longer, and in the other direction.
which can be accessed by an elevator. But guess what? It isn't working, so the main puzzle revolves around us fixing the elevator. So let's start exploring, starting with the study. And guess what? More loading screen quotes, so let's go over them real quick. These are labeled the trunk, and they start with a trunk belonging to Herbert, and it is about Daniel trying to reassemble the orb in an unsuccessful manner. The study is an interesting location, with a first letter regarding the discovery of an orb.
To my most trusted student and friend, Johann Weyer, the most remarkable thing has happened. As I was traveling through the Prussian woods this summer, I finally found one of the orbs I have been looking for the last 20 odd years. It is as inexplicable as the Palindromus described it in the Hortus Conclusus. It was, as it was told about, an underground Mithriac temple crowned with the unearthly artifact. The orb was big enough to fill my cupped hands, and the texture was smooth and jagged. Its color washed while rich. Contrast is not enough to describe its nature. It was an impossibility, an artificial paradox captured within a stone. I was staying in a nearby village called Altstadt, investigating one of the antiquated trails when I finally found the cavern. I went inside and suddenly I could verify the truth of these enigmatic artifacts. They were real. As you can understand, this is the most important discovery of my life, but it also has become my greatest fear. As I entered the underground chamber, I could feel that I was trespassing because of my curiosity. I did my best to fight these instincts and fetch the orb from its place. I scrambled out of the chamber and into the woods. I could sense something was following me. It bayed loudly as it closed in. The beast, this guardian of the orb, was restless in its pursuit. I made my way to a nearby ravine where I stumbled upon some men fishing in the lake. I tried to warn them as I passed, but fortunately they remained as I continued my escape. When I heard their cry of pain echo through the valley, I felt such a tremendous sense of relief, thinking I would be spared. Suddenly a blue shimmering light engulfed me, and the colours of the forest were washed away before my eyes. I kept running through the bleak surroundings. The trees had turned charcoal black, with leaves of cinder, the ground covered in murky water. I pressed on through the drenched land as the glowing ember gave way to the rising wind and rained on me. I could hear pleading screams in the distance, and I joined in as pain and fear overtook me. I fell to the ground, gasping for air. This certainly must sound strange, but I have been carried miles away across the Alps to a grassy field outside Genoa. The Guardian has taken the orb from me, but still, until this day, I fear its return. Sometimes I lay awake at night, listening for the howling cry I heard in the forest. It has been nearly a decade since the day, and I still haven't been able to write about the incident. The last time we spoke, you told me about your interest and ongoing research into the mythic orbs, and I realized I owed you the truth about my visit to Altstadt. Your friend and mentor, Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa.
First of all, a new character called the Johann Weyer, but it seems someone was searching for multiple orbs, and he found one in the caverns in Altstadt, an area close to Brennenburg. But once retrieving the orb, a guardian of the orb pursued them. The shadow chased them, with some fisherman he tried to warn about the shadow when he was running away from it, being killed by the shadow. But despite the shadow being preoccupied with this killing of the fisherman, it still caught up. This obviously tells us that the shadow is extremely powerful. Even killing two people, it doesn't slow down a bit, and tells us that we can't slow it down by throwing people in its way. And eventually the shadow caught up on and took the orb off of him. The writer of this letter states that they were too scared to write to Johann because of what happened, but decided to due to wanting to get some answers, and it is signed your friend and mentor Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, a real-life person as well. This character is of great importance to the story of Amnesia, so let's keep our eye on his name and also Johann's name in the future, because they'll definitely come up again. Exploring the study, we find a room with a bunch of animals sewed together, and
let's see what you have to offer. What a mess. I should have sharpened the saw, but I can sense it. It's definitely there.
Poor dog.
Yeah, that poor dog got its head cut off. In the study, we find a letter dated 1658, a little bit before the time of the game's setting of 1830s. And an antique dealer seemingly couldn't find anything about the inner workings of life that Alexander was asking questions for. So, taking it into his own hands, Alexander started to do his own research and came to the conclusion that humans will be more suited for what he is seeking. He is seeking some sort of substance that creatures secrete when they are experiencing extreme pain or fear or suffering. And these experiments basically involve what he was doing to the animals in the other room, cutting them up and torturing them in a way, which we can very clearly see. This is explained in a note also in this room, which I completely missed when my first pass through of the area, but when returning to it, I found it, so here's the note. It's pretty interesting. But we need to proceed further. With our pathway being blocked, we smashing the window and parkour our way through to the other window, we can now find another study room and another memory capsule.
When will it be my turn? Have I not shown restraint? My patience spans centuries from where I came. Mankind is not even wasted a breath, yet I bow to you. I've done so much for you, and I've gained nothing in return. Agrippa, I trusted you. It was I who, in all fairness, should have entered that gate.
Seems Alexander was getting impatient with returning to his home, and Agrippa seemingly was working with him at this point, which explains why his letter was in the castle. But Agrippa betrayed him in some way, with Alexander doing a lot for Agrippa apparently, but Agrippa had done nothing for him in return. In the next room, information on the elevator's mechanics, which is pretty normal, which explains how he can fix it, and it obviously acts as the main puzzle for the area. So we have to find a couple of items, which is pretty much the loop of Amnesia. You go to an area, you find a problem, you find a few items to fix the problem, and then you proceed further in. Rinse, repeat, we do it again and again. Going to the guest room.
My journal is gone. What would they want with my journal?
And we find another one of Daniel's diary entries titled Revelations.
2nd of July, 1839. I received a letter today from the Algerian governor's office disclosing the fate of Herbert's expedition. About a week after my departure, Abdullah, one of the men traveling with us, returned from the desert. He was badly injured, as if maimed by a lion. The man rambled deliriously about the expedition being attacked by something horrible. The French quickly dispatched a search party to look for the expedition. After searching for days, they found the camp abandoned without any trace of Herbert or his men. Tomorrow, I'll retrieve the things they recovered from Herbert's tent at the customs house. I don't know what to make of it, but I'm worried for him.
The first entry outlines Herbert, the man on the expedition in Algeria with Daniel, and Herbert was attacked in Algeria with the only survivor, a man called Abdullah, returning to a civilized part of society, and he looked like he had been maimed by a lion, and he was rambling about the group being attacked by something horrible. The French dispatched a search party but only found an abandoned camp without a single trace of where Herbert or his men actually went. Obviously, we can kind of guess what this is going to be. It's probably going to be the Shadow.
3rd of July, 1839. Today I picked up Herbert's things at the customs house. I dug through the trove of documents he had carried and found a log detailing the expedition. The nature of this text ranged from quick notes to colourful accounts of transpired events. I skimmed the pages, trying to figure out what might have happened. May 17th, the day I was trapped inside the orb chamber, Herbert dryly states, recovered Daniel after 1 hour of entrapment. This confused me greatly. I was suffocating within minutes. How could I have lasted an hour? I continued reading the peculiar text. Herbert states his facts without judgment or passion, but suddenly I could read frustration into his text. He pushed his men to investigate the underground tomb, an effort which seems to have strained the minds of his men. Madness spread through the ranks, and Herbert had to take some extreme measures to continue. He finally visits the chamber himself, where he retrieves the orb to the surface. His account confuses me greatly. If he has the orb, what are those pieces in my drawing room?
So Daniel had to retrieve all of Herbert's items from the expedition, and he found a document and a log detailing the expedition. These log notes ranged from very quickly written down in simple notes to in detail and very colourful language being used, recounting the events of what occurred on the expedition. Daniel tried to figure out what exactly happened, and this is basically what he got. May 17th, they recovered Daniel after he was trapped for 1 hour in the tomb. This confused Daniel a lot because he believed that he was suffocating within the tomb, and he can't understand how he would survive for over an hour in the tomb when he was suffocating. Obviously, this is now telling us that Daniel does not have a good recollection of events, and might tell us that he is not a good narrator. Or maybe it could be telling us that what Daniel perceived as suffocating and he was unable to breathe, he might have just been panicking, sort of linking into the game's main thing of sanity and basically having a panic attack. We've seen Daniel have panic attacks in the game already. He curls up and drops to the floor in like a fetal position, rocking backwards and forwards, which he's done at the start of the game and he does a few more times throughout the game. It also details how Herbert pushed the men into the tomb, but this led to them themselves going mad, which obviously can then link to Daniel with what he experienced, a completely different sensation from what actually happened. But he did eventually get to the tomb and he retrieved the orb from it, which is exactly what Daniel has, the broken orb. So how is there a second orb after Daniel was sent home? Well, from Agrippa's letter, we can basically assume that there are multiple orbs. So potentially there is an infinite amount of orbs, and wherever the orb basically sits, once you take the orb, another one will be there to replace it. But in Agrippa's letter, the shadow chased the person who retrieved the orb, Agrippa himself, and basically took it off of him. So this might explain why the shadow is currently chasing us. We did have the orb at some point, and also it tells us what happened to Herbert and his men. They took the orb and the shadow caught them, killing them. I love this use of the note system. Often games rely, in my opinion, too heavily on notes and diary entries to explain their lore, but Amnesia does something rather interesting. It puts the notes in obvious locations along the way of your path to progress the game, so they are optional, but you feel like you're kind of not playing the game correctly if you don't grab these notes and diary entries. And also, diary entries aren't just these massive lore dumps, they feel very intentional. Each letter gives you a piece of the puzzle which eventually does all come together, telling a more detailed and layered narrative, which I really do enjoy, and I think it's a good way to do notes, as I often kind of don't like how a lot of horror games handle notes, often just vomiting information at you through these notes, which a lot of indie horror games in my eyes nowadays do have some problems with. It's a perfect execution of horror in my eyes. It doesn't give us enough information outright, but already we are getting a puzzle and we are solving that puzzle along the way. But the key points that we're picking up now is the shadow is somehow linked to the orb, and whoever possesses the orb physically, a curse is put upon them and the shadow will hunt them until they either die or the orb is given back to the shadow. Inspecting the bed, we get another one of Daniel's memories. With this one,
Daniel? What? Still having nightmares, I see.
Yes, I can't shake them. They come every night.
We'll put a stop to them. You'll see.
Daniel seems to be plagued by terrible nightmares, which I wonder what could be causing them. Surely it is not the shadow itself. Cracking open the door with a crowbar to get into the other room to try find a key, something enters the guest room behind us and...
Please, let it be here.
We are told that we need to hide as there is no way to escape this entity, and you basically get the only time you can use a fucking wardrobe effectively in the game. I really like the idea that this game has a hiding mechanic where you can enter wardrobes whenever you feel like you need to, but you don't really use it a lot, which I think is a massive shame. Amnesia does this sort of thing where it has these really cool mechanics that I think could really feel the game completely, but it doesn't utilize them enough, and I think case in point, Amnesia doesn't want to be like other horror games, think Outlast or any other sort of scary jump scary game. It wants to make you feel like shit for doing anything. It wants to make you feel very uneasy at all times, but it doesn't want to exactly make you jump scare every 5 seconds, which I do appreciate, but there are some really cool mechanics here, mainly with the hiding and the AI of the gatherers, but they feel very underutilized, and I think it's a bit of a shame, and when playing it now in a modern sense, it does feel like it pulls its punches for no real reason. Obviously, this is probably due to, at the time, what was physical constraints on things like hardware and development time and just the developers not being as experienced. You have to remember, this was the developers, they just formed the game studio that made this game, and the people that made this game only made a few games before this. Amnesia was made very, very early on in the sort of modern gaming era, which is interesting to see, but man, I would love to see this game get a new breath of fresh air. Maybe, I know people don't like them, but a remake that really does take what these mechanics could be and elevate them even more, because I really do like Amnesia's style of using hiding as a mechanic, because I feel like the only game that really uses this mechanic in any way, shape or form that is even comparable and improved is Alien Isolation. But that was mainly due to the alien itself in Alien Isolation being so smart. But I digress. I still do like the idea of the mechanic, and obviously Amnesia has a massive benefit of having custom stories, which obviously use these mechanics a lot more, which you can dive into, but I'm just looking at the base game here, and I think it's a shame that very little is done with these mechanics in the base game itself. But I do love this moment. Being able to crack the door open and see the Gatherer walking around is so cool to me, and it's classic horror. You see it in every film, and I just love it. With the Gatherer finally gone, we can now obtain the final Revelations diary entry.
4th of July, 1839. It's done! The orb is assembled. I was awakened by an exhausting nightmare. Shaking and sweating, I retired to the drawing room with a cup of tea. The relic pieces lay spread across the table as I'd left them, but somehow I knew how it was supposed to be. I fetched the tar, which I had prepared to fix the pieces together, and without fault I joined them, producing the orb I remembered so clearly. The tar proved unnecessary. It was pushed out from the joining pieces as they merged on their own, with no adhesive. The ancient stone relic now rests on my table. Its immaculate surface and perfect shape could have been molded by a factory. This is all too strange.
Daniel has reassembled the orb, and I'm sure the shadow is not going to come hunt him now due to him possessing a physical orb. Finding the machine room key, we can now leave and enter the machine room, and yes, guess what? A new set of quotes that we need to go through. These labeled The Hand. These quotes display multiple people who have died due to someone's curiosity, probably Daniel's, but Daniel seemingly has found a link between the orb and monarchs of ages past. He found 9 monarchs of previous civilizations holding an orb that resembles what he has. This sparked his curiosity, and seemingly he sent letters to almost everyone he could think of and get in contact with. But one letter specifically that was returned to him frightened him greatly, and it was the only letter that seemed to sort of know something about the orb itself. It offered some level of comfort, but also terrified him. In the machine room, we find another diary entry titled Haunted.
5th of July, 1839. Today I went to the university looking for answers. I was able to sneak into Herbert's office and pick up an address book along with some relevant textbooks. Professor Taylor at the Faculty of History was very helpful, and I managed to approach the subject of the orbs. The most interesting aspect was the prevalent trace they had left in our culture. The mythic orbs may, in fact, have inspired the globus cruciger, which so many royal regalia holds to this day. In ancient times, the orbs were held by priests as a symbol of the sun and its power. As I was leaving, I overheard a disturbing conversation. Sir William Smith, the geologist, was killed last night. Less than a fortnight had passed since I'd asked for his expertise. I know it's silly, but I can't help feeling responsible somehow.
So Daniel went to a university looking for answers surrounding his mysterious ball. Sneaking into Herbert's office, he was able to obtain an address book of colleagues in the same field as Herbert, and some relevant textbooks which could help him analyze the orb himself. In this set of addresses, he found a Professor Taylor who was very helpful on the subject of Daniel's ball, and they found that the ball itself had left a massive impact in history and culture specifically. The ball itself was inspired by the globus cruciger, or the Auburn cross, something that you see many monarchs held throughout all of history, and here in the UK, our kings and queens still do hold it when they get crowned. However, as Daniel was leaving, he overheard a conversation about a Sir William Smith who had just been killed. This is the same Sir William Smith that Daniel saw just a fortnight ago, and he believes that potentially him meeting with Sir William Smith and his death might be linked. Maybe the shadow, potentially with him now reassembling the orb, maybe it is come hunting for him. Entry 2 is a bit more interesting.
14th of July, 1839. I've read every book I can find on the subject. While rich in legend and hearsay, my knowledge is lack for the insight I crave. I've sent letters to many in Herbert's address book and received answers of varying importance. Today, I got one which differed greatly from the others. From a baron in Prussia. He said nothing about the quaint stories of priests in underground temples. He didn't even mention them. He simply wrote, "I know. I can protect you. Come to Brennenburg Castle. Signed, Alexander." What am I to make of this? Protect me from what? Is someone after me? I looked up Brennenburg and traced it to the Prussian woods near the Baltic Sea. While being the least informative letter I've received, it causes me greatest distress and interest. As I write, my thoughts are drawn to my nightmares in which a most disturbing sound calls to me. A sound defying description. A voice from the void. The last few weeks have been awful, with so many sleepless nights dreading a repeat of those horrid dreams. Tomorrow, I shall visit my physician, Dr. Tate, in hope that he can provide me with sedatives to help me sleep.
Daniel has searched high and low and spoke to every credible person on the face of the earth, and all have given him a similar answer, except the Baron of Brennenburg, with a note he sent to Daniel simply stating, "I know I can protect you." Alexander knew exactly what was happening to Daniel, and he knew his life was in mortal danger. This tells us, basically explicitly, that Alexander knows much more about the orbs than anyone on the world will ever know. With them being otherworldly and Alexander being described as a man from another world at points, we can assume that maybe the place Alexander wants to return to and the place where the orbs originate from could potentially be one and the same place. In the last paragraph, Daniel's nightmares are the only thing currently bothering him. The shadow itself has not caught up to him yet, but his nightmares are getting worse and worse as each day goes on, potentially indicating that the shadow and the nightmares are also linked. As the shadow gets closer, the nightmares get worse. And finally, entry 3.
17th of July, 1839. How has this escaped me? They're all dead. Limbs scattered, head split down the middle, their skin flayed as if boiled. I feel like I'm falling into myself. What's happening? Sir William Smith, Professor Taylor, now Dr. Tate. Is it following me? How can it not be? It's the damn thing I brought from Africa. Something is after me. I have no choice but to trust the Baron. He better know what he claims. If he is wrong, I suspect he'll regret it as well.
Yes, the shadow is fully following his trail, with the people he has previously visited all being killed. With no options left and with no one to turn to, Daniel takes the Baron up on his offer and heads to Brennenburg. But yes, Daniel is in some serious shit now. Now, doing the funny machine puzzle, we head to the storage room and encounter another gatherer. And a rather interesting memory.
Please, let me go. I won't tell anyone, I swear. I just want to go home. No! Get away from me! Leave me alone!
These memories sound violent, and they're Daniel's memories. So what did Daniel do to this person to frighten them so much? And why are we hearing this now? Why are they crying? Why are they screaming? Why did Daniel want to forget his memories? But to progress further, we need to create some explosives. So of course we drill open some vats, get two things, mix them together, bing bang bitch. Proceeding further, more memories emerge.
Why are you doing this? Get away from me!
And it sounds terrifying, whatever Daniel did. That does not sound like a pleasure scream. It sounds like their last breath. And of course, we now ask the question, these are Daniel's memories. If you're remembering a memory, it must be your memory, if that makes sense. So with these being Daniel's memories, that obviously tells us that he physically got violent with a woman at some point and potentially killed her. And proceeding a bit further, fire. I don't get this part. The woman screams. I think it's something linked to the woman, but we need to go here to get the part for the machine. And yes, guess what? A gatherer comes in to ambush us again, but we just hide in the corner for a bit. Doing my best Solid Snake, we make our way back past the gatherer, but guess what? Another gatherer cuts you off, making you have to think quick on your feet, because you have to back up and find somewhere to hide, or try to do my best impression of playing Metal Gear Solid, but somehow fucking it up.
You rat bastard.
It didn't work, so I just booked it out of the room and back to the machine room to insert the rods and fix the elevator. But the shadow again is not too happy about us fixing it, but we escape down the lift and enter,
Now. Bro, watch this. I tank this. We jump lost.
This is an interesting area. Now we enter the prison or dungeon area of the castle of Brennenburg, and we get again another memory of Daniel's.
Come, this way.
What was that?
Forgive me, I should have warned you. One of my responsibilities as a baron is that of a prison warden. This is where criminals are locked up.
Like a dungeon?
Very much so. Come, don't linger.
So the Baron was also responsible for a prison itself and all the people that were basically imprisoned here, which is a lot for a single man to do. Too bad that all the people down here have now turned into a bunch of bros, and we just have to run away from them because they're going to constantly give us chase in here. Investigating one of the cells, we get to relive a rather interesting memory again.
Where is she? Where did she go?
No, I won't tell. I'll never tell you.
You're just making things worse. Look, this is no place for a young girl all by herself. She could be hurt or worse. There's no telling what horrors await down there.
So we hear Daniel asking a woman where another woman went, with Daniel sounding rather quite angry about it, and rather quite angry with the girl escaping. But he seemingly just wants to help her, so why wouldn't the woman tell him exactly where she went? I wonder what Daniel did to basically get people so desperate that they will lie and try to escape the prison. Also, why are these people imprisoned here? And why did Daniel so desperately want to forget all these memories? In another cell, we can hear a mother and a child, which is extreme because that means there is children as prisoners here, which is what the fuck is Alexander doing with these people? Basically, they're trying to escape and the mother wants the child to alert the king to save them from whatever the Baron is doing to them. Obviously, this tells us that the Baron is not on the side of the law or the side of God. Kings, queens, monarchs were always viewed as the figure that represented God themselves. Here in the UK, the monarch is the figurehead for the Church of England, and a lot of other cultures do follow suit on this. With this memory, it obviously tells us a way to progress the game, so we move the bed out of the way and boom, we find the hole the child escaped through. Using a hammer and pick, we can basically extend the hole and we can drop down to get into a previously inaccessible part of the dungeon. And with a new area, of course, a new set of loading screen quotes. These labelled Brennenburg. Each of these detail the appearance of Brennenburg Castle belonging to Alexander, indicating Daniel's first impressions of when he actually arrived at the location. But seemingly, the act of basically grabbing the orb and taking it from where it was a universal wrong, and the shadow isn't an angry or vengeful thing. It wants to try right a wrong in the world by placing the orb back where it belongs. Diving through the tunnel, we enter a previously inaccessible part of the dungeon, and we find yet another one of Daniel's diaries titled Brennenburg.
2nd of August, 1839. I have arrived at the village of Altstadt. It's a haven in the midst of a vast forest and the last stop before my final destination, Castle Brennenburg. It's late in the evening, and the outrider, who has been with the coach since Bremen, advised me to wait until morning before I venture further. I've arranged for a bed at Der Müller, the village's only inn, and am now waiting for the sun to rise. I try to sleep, but as I close my eyes, I see the men who fell victim in London. My fear and shame forces me to witness the same scenes over and over. They are dead because of me.
Brandenburg. Entry 1 details Daniel's arrival in the village of Altstadt, with him staying at an inn for the night, but sleep isn't a comfort he could obtain, with him being plagued again with terrible nightmares due to the guilt he feels for all the people who got killed due to whatever is following him. A little further in the cell, the second entry.
3rd of August, 1839. I feel like I have fled the world and all its worries. Brandenburg is a majestic creation perched upon a forest-clad hill with towers reaching well above even the highest pine trees. Following the winding road leading to the gates gives the impression of discovering something forgotten, as if journeying with Marco Polo to the hidden Xanadu. Alexander, the Baron, is a peculiar but gracious man. He seems well versed in worldly matters and is not at all as eccentric as I assumed. My room is exquisite, and I'm confident that no hotel for miles could even hope to match it. As the sun sets on Brandenburg, its fairy tale varnish turns to an eerie gloom. Alexander's strange servants are never far away. They are a quiet lot, and their behavior could only be described as skulking. Alexander seems pleased by my presence. As he puts it, it seems like I got here just in time.
First impressions of Brandenburg Castle seem to be very, very good, but as night falls, the castle turns into what we are currently playing through, an uncomfortable, gloomy, and dingy place. But Alexander seemingly has servants who, let's say, not warm and inviting like you'd want them to be, more quiet, and they skulk about in the shadows, trying to remain hidden. And more ominously, Alexander is pleased that Daniel arrived at his home, which is odd considering everyone that Daniel visited in the past few weeks has ended up dead. And Alexander somehow knew that something was following Daniel and trying to kill him. So how does Alexander first of all know this? And then second of all, why is he happy that Daniel's here if he knows that this thing is trying to kill him and will kill anyone that is in his path? It could be because that he wants the orb for something. Surely not, with it being the only item that we know that could be potentially linked to him. But what about entry 3?
4th of August, 1839. The nightmares woke me in the early morning, and for a moment I forgot where I was. Shortly after, there was a knock on my door. Alexander had heard my screams and asked me to join him in the parlor. As we drank our tea, Alexander began to tell me what he knew. It seems like the orb I found casts a long and dark shadow. It's not only a powerful item, but a dangerous one. Simply by touching it, you invoke the powers within, and if you are too weak to control it, it will devour you. The shadow is a sluggish thing, lagging behind the wielder, killing anyone or anything in its path to reclaim the orb. I said I didn't care about its powers and that I should throw it away. Alexander advised against this, as I'd still be a part of the path to the orb and eventually suffer death. Having the orb, I would at least have the chance to fight back when the time came. I asked Alexander what he meant when he said he could protect me, and he answered that things can be done, but at a price.
We now finally get some answers about what the orb actually is, with Alexander filling in some key pieces of information. First of all, it seems to have some kind of mystical power, but anyone who claims the orb is now cursed by a long and dark shadow, which wants to reclaim the orb and place it back in its rightful place. While the shadow is slow and it will lag behind the current owner of the orb, it will kill anyone or anything in the path of the orb to reclaim it, meaning anyone you meet, cross paths with, or have a passing conversation with will end up dead. This means that anyone that Daniel met for example, at an inn, for example, they will end up dead eventually by the shadow. If I had to compare it to something, it kind of reminds me of Shadow Mario from the Mario games. It follows their exact path, and basically, you have to outrun it or you die. Daniel questions why he can't just throw the orb away, but Alexander advises against this. He is now a part of the shadow's path. It is not following Daniel, it is following the orb. If he throws the orb away, Daniel is still on the path to the orb. So even if he did throw the orb away, the shadow would eventually kill him to get to the orb. So the best thing that they can do is keep the orb on them and use it when the shadow comes for us and fight back against it. But he will only do this if Daniel helps him with something that he wants. A certain price must be fulfilled for him to offer his services to us. So obviously the fact that we can even use the orb against the shadow tells us that the orb has some kind of mystical power and has something that is beyond human comprehension, because it can fight something that is beyond human comprehension. Solving the puzzle in the area with the acid that we can find, we can enter the cistern area.
So you use the drain sewers as a means of transport?
Yes, they were built to divert water from an underground spring and are quite spacious. It seemed only natural to incorporate it into the overall structure.
But we won't be using it.
Not today. The flow is seasonal, and when the spring runs dry, the damp tunnels produce a rather poisonous type of fungi. There is an antidote, of course, but we won't be bothering with it today. Come, this way instead. We're almost there.
With our path forward being locked and the other way being flooded, so we have to find a way to either unlock the door or drain the water. It's going to be drain the water. Enter the control room, we indeed get some new quotes, these titled Alexander. These describe the castle of Brennenburg and Daniel's first confrontation with the shadow, with it bursting red taint coming from the walls, beginning to bleed. But Alexander had to finish a ritual, but needed to farm the material for said ritual. Vitae, the same material which he had been studying in the animals which he had been torturing, finding that suffering and fear caused the living creatures to release it, so they needed to find a way to harvest a large amount of it to fulfill a ritual. And who releases the most amount of Vitae when you punish them or torture them or inflict pain upon them? Humans. So we can kind of sort of pick up the pieces of why the Baron of Brennenburg has a prison now. In the control room, we need to fix the machinery to lower the other bridge to get to one of the other doors in the cistern entrance. But let's actually enter the cistern now. Needing to drain the sewers, you need to find some valves scattered around which will allow you to drain the water from these sewers. But we can also find some more diary entries labelled Discovery.
7th of August, 1839. There is no denying that Alexander puts a lot of faith into what I can only describe as magic. I'm not surprised. Even while traveling across Europe, I assumed I would have to embrace the supernatural to save my mind and life. As a novice, I do everything in my power to stay focused and not dwell too much on my own doubts. Alexander woke me up early and told me it was time we got started on our work. He was obviously excited to get going, and we headed downstairs to the old dungeon where he preferred to attempt his rituals. It turns out that Alexander is a true Renaissance man, paralleled only by Da Vinci, I'm sure. He showed me several rooms fitted for specific research, such as anatomy studies, alchemy, and botany. The crown of Brennenburg must be the inner sanctum, a most hallowed ground where we shall attempt to permanently banish the orb's shadow.
Daniel is now diving into the full-on supernatural, with Alexander seemingly being very familiar with it, with magic in general as well, and he embraces it fully. Daniel also compares Alexander to Da Vinci, as he is a true Renaissance man. Alexander having multiple rooms fitted with very specific bits of research from anatomy, alchemy, and botany, it tells us that he is a rather, let's say, interested man. He has a lot of passions and he wants to research a lot. Obviously, Da Vinci did this as well. Da Vinci was interested in absolutely fucking everything, and he did experiments on almost anything and research and about everything you can think of. So Alexander is very much a very intelligent individual. The second entry is a bit more interesting.
8th of August, 1839. I could never be certain until today that I was on the right path. Using my orb, Alexander managed to channel its power unto us. The inner sanctum flared with blue, fiery light, and I could feel the same things I felt in the dark chamber in Algeria. It was like standing in a mad whirlpool of impressions. It was terrifying. But Alexander kept calm and wielded strange tools of science in order to tame the storm. Suddenly, the blue light was stained by strains of red, and the walls burst with pulsating tissue resonating with the scene. Alexander quickly covered the orb in some cloth, and the unspeakable thing vanished. Apparently, the orb's shadow is closer than Alexander thought. He said I should prepare for a warding ritual tomorrow. I'm not sure what he expects, but I have a bad feeling about this.
So Alexander has unlocked the orb's power and given it to the two, himself and Daniel. But the shadow is closer than they believed, so they now need to prepare for a ritual tomorrow to ward it off. And the third entry,
9th of August, 1839. It is still early, and Alexander is busy preparing for the ritual later today. Seeing him this worked up makes me question why. What does he stand to gain? I realize he is curious about it all, but surely there must be more. Is he so foolish he will attempt to tame the power of the orb? I must admit that yesterday, when Alexander flooded the inner sanctum with blue light, I realized we had but graced the orb's true potential. This might turn out to be more than escaping a creeping shadow. It might be the beginning of something truly extraordinary.
Daniel begins to question Alexander's motive, wondering why he's helping him so much and what does he stand to gain from the actual power from the orb. Why would he curse himself with the shadow just to get its power? I wonder if it has to do with Alexander getting home to his lover. I wonder if the orb is directly linked to this goal that he has, and maybe explains why he went to Brennenburg in the first place. We know an orb was here, so that might explain why he's here in the first place. Potentially. Finishing up in the cistern and fully draining the sewers, we now need to create an antidote to not be poisoned by the poisonous fungi in the sewers, which are spewing out their spores because mushrooms. So we head into the morgue, and God help us,
Do you see, Daniel? It has yielded. What? The shadow. It has? For now. Come, let's get this out of here so we can get some peace.
Yes, let's. Where to?
Just down the corridor, to the morgue.
Are there more dead men there?
You did well, Daniel. Come, let's get going.
the shadow has yielded due to the ritual they seemingly performed on something. Now I question, why does a baron have so many responsibilities? He has a prison, he has a morgue, he has a bunch of research rooms, he has the entire castle of Brennenburg, he has basically an entire fucking sewer system beneath his castle. This guy has a lot of stuff and he seems to have a lot of time. But obviously, we know that the Baron has lived a long time, so it explains why he's able to do all these things. But man, how do you find this much time in the day to do all these different things and all these different bits of research? Now in the morgue, we need to make the antidote itself using a recipe that we can find, which Alexander basically came up with, and we find in the room a desk and another memory capsule.
I fear for Daniel, for he is reckless. He is tainted by the approaching shadow and will not be able to pass the gate. Will he be able to accept this is the end? My love, I've seen evil in him. How am I to trust him with the truth? What cruel irony that I have to do unto him what Agrippa did unto me.
Alexander sees evil in Daniel and he believes he will be unable to pass the gate to another world, the one that he is trying to travel to. And Alexander is concealing the whole truth from Daniel, believing that he cannot be trusted with it, being similar to what happened with Agrippa. Alexander trusted Agrippa with the entire truth seemingly, and Agrippa completely betrayed him. Basically, Agrippa did what Alexander is now doing to Daniel. Agrippa held his true intentions away from him to get a goal that he wanted in the end, but this is exactly what Alexander is doing to Daniel. It's kind of ironic that he said that he was better than mortal man, but he is someone that will stoop to the same level as them. Now inside the morgue you will find a bunch of dead bodies,
Holy shit.
with them being discarded with no respect whatsoever, a juxtaposition to a morgue itself, what it is meant to do, handle and look at bodies with extreme care. And in one of the rooms we hear a memory of a man trapped inside the morgue, and he seemingly was alive.
What happened? Why are all these dead? Where am I? What's happening? Help! Anybody! Help!
This indicates that the morgue's purpose might not be the traditional sense of a morgue. It might be used for a slightly different purpose, but what could that purpose be? Surely not the farming of the mythical vitae that Alexander's rituals need apparently. But no respectable baron would do this to people, trap them in a room and let them suffer. Yeah, that's exactly where this is going, so be warned, Amnesia gets pretty fucked at times, and the subject matter is pretty dark, and the things we will see and what I'm going to have to describe are pretty fucked. And they are all real things, so this is nothing you would not see in a history book, basically. Now to get the antidote, we can get a blood transfusion from someone who received the antidote, and the guy on the table just so happened to have the antidote in his bloodstream. So we get a blood transfusion from him by sticking a needle in his head and getting blood from there. With that done and dusted, we can now enter the sewers, but not before getting ambushed by yet another gatherer. Entering the sewers, we get some more quotes titled The Well. The first two bring up a new character, Henry Bedloe, a classmate of Daniel, a boy with a tough home life. And the pain he felt in his home life he pushed onto others, making others cry instead of making himself cry. And a statement which is kind of true. With pain, you either become sad or angry, depending on who you are. But Daniel was bullied by this Henry, and the quote earlier about striking a boy with a rock, yeah, this was Daniel lashing out and choosing anger instead of sadness when experiencing pain. It gives an insight into how Daniel deals with hardship and how he deals with someone wronging him. He will choose violence over being sad. And obviously the next quote is him being fearful of Henry coming to his house for revenge, something which will come back later. And a few more quotes which have Hazel, Daniel's sister, be mentioned in that she is very sick and bedridden, with him reading to her every night. But when Hazel turned 15, she had lived 3 more years than the doctor predicted for her, but her extended life had worn out her parents due to them having to work extra hours to be able to take care of her. So they committed her to a hospice for care, and this is when Daniel left for Algeria, a sort of breakdown of his family life because his parents, obviously, they couldn't deal with taking care of their own child anymore, and he might have seen this as a sort of betrayal in a way. Heading into the sewers, we find a spinning water wheel blocking our path, and we regain yet another memory.
What's happening? What are you doing? Let me go! Please, don't take me! Nobody ever returned!
It's interesting. What do people not return from? Why are there so many people begging to be let go, just like that mother and child in the prison? What exactly did Alexander and Daniel do with this warding ritual that has been mentioned? Why was vitae needed, and can vitae only be harvested from pain and suffering? Is there no other way to actually obtain it? Well, breaking the water wheel by sticking a pipe in it when it's slowed down a bit, we can now move forward and get in a bit of a situation with a couple of gatherers, but here I discovered you can actually stun them by throwing shit at them. Diving deeper, we eventually
What a thrill.
and we get to a new part of the cistern. In here we can find another part of Daniel's diary labelled Ritual.
9th of August 1839. I can't stop sweating and shaking. The warding ritual was not something of a sane mind. I did not even realize the dungeon was still in use. Alexander had his servants bring one of the prisoners, a murderer, he told me. Alexander made all the arrangements, but he said I had to perform the ritual in order to have the right effect. The shadow could be led astray by the blood of another. Killing the man would provide us precious time. What else could I do? Alexander said it had to be done. He is saving my life. I don't have the luxury of argument.
Finally learn that the ritual is more sacrificial in nature, with the blood of the killing leading the shadow astray from Daniel, giving Daniel more time to find a way to either destroy it or save himself. But what happens when you engage with an activity that is not of the sane mind? What if you're a sane person and you do this activity over and over again? Well, you lose that mind. Your sanity slips, the good in you starts to fade. Deeper in the dungeon, we hear a memory from Agrippa with him losing his ability to move completely on his own. And in the next room...
Ooh, spicy.
Thank you. You have my gratitude. My name is Agrippa. Who might you be? Daniel? Like the prophet thrown into the lion's den? Tell me. Are you among the lions, Daniel? You want to stop Alexander? Oh my, so Babylon shall fall, you say? You worry too much. Alexander is toothless without an awe. He has one. That's not very promising at all. The sanctum is basically impenetrable, but guess why more? It could be breached by another, but Alexander broke his, my oath, a long time ago. Really? Well, if you tell the truth, by all means, seek out the pieces of the broken oath and mend away. I believe he uses them for torture now. They practically leak matter, which is quite useful, I understand. There should be 6 of them. Look around the choir and the transept. You should be able to find them there.
we meet the actual Agrippa, with him asking us to help him with a task, but we need to free him from this husk of a body. If it isn't obvious, after Agrippa and Johann betrayed Alexander, Alexander became so angry and so filled with rage that he just basically did this to Agrippa and basically kept him here. Probably tortured him and probably has done God knows what to him, but we can see that he is no longer the man that he probably once was. He is a husk of his former self. But what do we need to do to help him? Well, we need to reassemble the orb, find 6 pieces of the orb, which are Agrippa's orb, and reassemble it, and we also need to make him a tonic to free him from his body. Inside a cell, we hear a memory from a man who seems to have forgotten something, but knows something happened to him, with the taste of Damascus rose obscuring the truth, a truth behind the many cuts that riddle his body, indicating he was forced to forget something which was done to him. Damascus rose is an interesting use of a phrase to describe a taste of something, because it has been used earlier, the taste of Turkish delights. This is obviously indicating that the man was fed something, but he can't remember what exactly, and he has forgotten something, just like Daniel did. It seems that there is something that they have to consume, which will result in them forgetting something completely. But of course, the many cuts, bruises, whatever this man was riddled with, tells us that Alexander and Daniel were beating him repeatedly, torturing him, and then making him forget it, and then doing it all over again. The man knew it was happening due to the story on his body, but he obviously physically cannot remember it. And now we enter the chancel and get some more quotes titled Strappado. They recount Daniel's experiences doing the ritual, torturing a man so much he was no longer able to breathe properly. And these actions of cutting a man reminded him of his father, an artisan, comparing his father's job of doing something with his bare hands to torture, displaying Daniel's descent into darkness, hey, name of the game, almost justifying his actions in a way as necessary for his survival, just like his father had to do to keep his daughter alive and care for her. But not only that, Daniel has started to take pride in his work, enjoying torturing people. The chancel in general looks very, very different. The lights, the fire is blue. It obviously indicates that this place is of a significant importance, and it very much is, as we get another flashback scene.
Just a little further.
It's like Orpheus descending into the underworld.
Are you hiding something?
What do you mean?
Never mind. Your intuition is remarkable.
I'm not sure I'm following.
It doesn't matter. It's just a myth after all.
Alexander's unease and saying that Daniel's intuition is remarkable indicates what Daniel just stated is true, but Daniel didn't actually realize it. Alexander's story revolves around him going to another world to be reunited with his lover, and that's exactly what the figure that Daniel mentioned, Orpheus, did. Orpheus traversed to the underworld to be reunited with his long-lost love, and it's almost as if these ancient tales constantly repeat themselves. We see it in many different cultures and things. You'll notice that many figures, their stories are repeated. For example, the birth of Jesus Christ is repeated throughout a couple of religions and older civilizations, but the stories are slightly different. The same here. He's not called Orpheus, he's called Alexander. But it's almost as if these stories are one and the same. It's almost as if Alexander is Orpheus, indicating us that these sort of mythical beings are actually otherworldly beings themselves. They're not gods, they're just higher beings from another world. At one end of the chancel, a barrier blocks our path forward, with us needing to assemble the orb to drop it. So, we make our way into the other rooms in the chancel and find a sacrificial table, okay? At the other end, we find Daniel's diary titled Prisoners.
12th of August, 1839. Banishment ritual is taking longer than expected, and we have to do what is needed. I spend my time helping out with the prisoners. Being around these degenerates makes me ill. None of them even tries to face their punishment with any kind of dignity. They taunt me with their lies of innocence and their cowardly pleas of mercy. What can make a man fall so far from the grace of a civilized existence? They are all wicked men, and I remind myself of it constantly. Still, I am thankful for God sending these monsters our way, as they will serve as the instruments of my salvation. I try to study the different tools in the torture chamber and learn how to use them effectively. Last time was messy, and the effect suffered from my inexperience. When the next warding is to be performed, I shall be ready.
This outlines Daniel's experiences handling the prisoners themselves in the dungeon, with them all pleading, saying that they are innocent, but he believes that they are all wicked, evil people who will do nothing but lie to try save themselves. He believes he is on the side of God. He is righteous. He is right. But is he? He takes no issue with utilizing the many tools of torture that Alexander has graciously allowed him to use, but does he really understand what he's doing? Does he know the full story behind these people? Are they actually criminals? Has he been shown that fully? He is very much taking Alexander on his word and just going along with it. With nothing less than the Chancellor, we head back to Agrippa and enter one of the unlocked doors, which you can unlock by flipping a hatch, and we can find pieces of the orb scattered about between these two doors, 3 on each side, and also collect some of the ingredients that are required for the tonic. Entering a large room, we get a new memory with a man begging for death.
How much more, Baron? How much more am I supposed to withstand? Kill me already! Kill me!
This one, prepare him.
And a large spiral staircase ascending in the center. Ascending it, we find a study with a piece of string and a note on torture, which explains the most effective method of torture for obtaining vitae. And to ensure the victims can experience the worst experience of their life, the first time they are tortured over and over again, they utilize a certain tonic, the Amnesia drink, to make them forget. The same drink that man was fed that tasted of Damascus rose. The same drink that apparently tastes similar to Turkish delights. And in the desk, another memory capsule.
Is it to you, my love, I miss the most, or is it perhaps myself? I know what I have become. I am not blind, I am a monster to them, a demonic sultan perched on a dark mountaintop. There is little I can do to redeem myself. The Black Eagle fears me, and after Napoleon's defeat, it is only a matter of time before they will demand my head on a platter. I must remove myself from this land. This time it must work. If I can't return home now, I shall perish.
This shows how desperate Alexander was to return home to his lover. Napoleon obviously was one of the, he was not liked by a lot of people, and once Napoleon was dealt with, he was next on the chopping block, which indicates to us that he actually had a much larger spread of influence than we might have known before. And it shows that he was actually in mortal danger and he can be killed if he feared people. Now we get to see some of the many torture contraptions that Daniel and Alexander utilized to obtain vitae, and interacting with them you get memories or sort of flashbacks of the people that were here, each having the person labeled with a crime and describing their death. So let's start with the
kidnapper sat on her knees with her hands tied behind her back. She felt her hands being lifted and her body followed. Her shoulders gave way to the weight of her own body and cracked loudly. The suspended woman cried hysterically as the men contemplated their next step.
We can also find one piece of the orb next to the contraption, and we need to explore 5 more rooms to get all of them. Next, the saw room.
The rapist hanged upside down, his tears soiled with blood flowing from his belly. The saw between his legs had lodged itself in the hip and wouldn't move any further. The men stepped back and waited for the victim to drain. Jesus.
And we yet again attain another piece. Next, the cradle room. But before it, we get a memory.
Let me go, you brute!
The cradle is ready.
Good.
You're a man! How can you partake in this?
Is he all right?
He is one of the wicked. Don't pay his lies any attention.
I'm not a bad man. It was an accident.
He set a man on fire.
It wasn't my fault. Why won't anyone listen?
That's horrible.
Of course. We are dealing with monsters here.
With the victim saying that Daniel is a man, distinguishing him from Alexander, seemingly that he is saying that Alexander is not a man but a beast. He also says that he did his crime by accident, pleading for his life. And what was his crime? Arson. Does a man who did arson deserve a death like this? Torture is one of the most painful deaths that can be thought of, and basically is up to the behest of the torturer of how much they suffer.
No, please! Do anything! Whatever you want! Anything! I'll do anything! I'm innocent!
The cradle is one of the worst items that you can be tortured on that I can think of. It is horrific and it is very simple in the way it's used. It is very brutal and it is very unapologetic to its victims.
The arsonist kept crying as he was slowly lowered on and off the impaler. It didn't take much to break him. They had meant for him to die, but the torture was working beyond their expectations. It wasn't the method, it was the arsonist. He was different from the others. They could make him forget again. Oh my god, so they fucking kept this guy and just farmed him. Jesus.
Yes, they let this man live and they made him forget, and they did it all over again. He was different, Daniel said. It was almost as if he wasn't a criminal. And if the last two were, maybe this is why the arsonist was so much better than the last two. It's because he actually wasn't. He was telling the truth. Unlike the rapist and the kidnapper, who probably did do their crimes, he very much did it by accident. He genuinely didn't mean to do it. He was a good person. It distinguishes him from the bad people who might not be as effective at getting vitae, and a good person. And this would obviously plant a seed in Alexander's mind on what would be a more effective way to obtain vitae. Heading back to Agrippa, as we head through the other door, we find a study with a note about Agrippa and a memory capsule.
In court, the Order of the Black Eagle spew their politics at each other while I sit quietly in place, willfully forgotten. Once in a while, someone will notice me and lose themselves in a silent cower before regaining their senses. They all know I am the one and the same Alexander who helped their fathers and grandfathers to found this great order. I've seen them take their fathers' places, and they too will grow old and pass away, while I remain the same, aged not by time, but by anguish.
Alexander invokes fear in the members of the Black Eagle Order, as they know he is the same man who helped their fathers and their grandfathers, showing that yes indeed, if you didn't pick up on this point, that Alexander is not of this world. He is a being who lasts much longer and doesn't seem to age at all. Heading further, we now enter the choir entrance, and in one of the rooms in the entrance hallway, we find a diary entry labelled Sacrifice.
15th of August, 1839. The blood wards are failing. The shadow beckons, and its cry disarms my actions. Hurry, no time to spare. You have to kill another. Alexander produces a knife. He wants me to cut the flesh. Do it. Save yourself. He is a murderer, Daniel. He is evil, a cold-blooded killer. Hurry. Alexander, you must let me be. I have to concentrate. Take the man, cut the lines, cut the flesh, watch the blood spill, let it come. Please, I didn't do anything. Paint the man, cut the lines, paint the man, cut the lines. Please, the man cries. Now you see. I did well. One life for another. You hear me, guardian of the orb? I did all this for you. Now, once more, withdraw your shadow from my domain. Alexander, there isn't much time. I can feel it. We must act swiftly. I will do whatever it takes.
Daniel doesn't seem to be doing too well. He is mentally losing it, justifying his own actions as necessary. He has killed so many people to extend his own life, but each person begs for their life, pleads with him, asks if it's worth it what he's doing. But what if some of them are not lying? What if the arsonist was innocent? What if all these people they're now kidnapping are innocent people after Alexander learned that the arsonist was so much more effective because he was indeed innocent? He was accused of a crime he never committed, and no matter what he said, he could not convince them to stop. Going further into the choir, we enter the main hall. This room is dark and falling apart, with plant life growing everywhere, showing how decayed the castle truly is. And here, a rather cheeky gatherer who gave me a bit of a hard time.
Oh my god, it's faster than me.
And Alexander gives us a lecture about Daniel finding the orb and everything that happened is his fault, and if he just left the orb, what happened would have not happened, and he would never have gone through all of this, but everyone's death is on his hands. We can also find a couple more ingredients for the tonic for Agrippa, but more importantly, we can find 3 more torture rooms, each with their own orb pieces, starting with the wheel room.
The wheel is good for keeping your victims still during the procedure. They can be bound around the circumference or simply stretched across, tying limbs to the spokes and rim. All tools are by this point useful, and you may administer the torture in any way you like. But the forte of the wheel is the gaps. When you have decided that the victim shall die, you can smash their limbs with a hammer, making them fold in between the frame.
But they'll die. Too quickly, I mean.
No, don't worry. The human body is much more resilient. They can survive for days until they finally succumb.
Yeah, this man is interesting.
The murderer's limbs were tied to the spokes of the wheel. They turned the wheel slowly, but with intent, so the rope secured around his leg stretched and cracked the bone. He no longer had the strength to scream. The 2 men looked at each other knowingly and took the hammer and struck the victim's chest in a final act of mercy.
So they broke a man so badly that when he no longer had the strength to show fear, due to him not being able to scream anymore, they killed him. He was worthless to them now, so they just got rid of him and would replace him with another. They were being as efficient as possible to farm vitae. Right, the next room is the Iron Maiden.
The 4 just stood absolutely still. The casket had been closed, but a faint light made its way inside. A myriad of spikes pointed at him, glittering as they waited for his body to slip just for a moment. His knee jerked and he felt blood trickle down his leg. In pain, he slightly fell forward. It took him a while to realize his eye had ruptured and begun to leak. Oh my god.
Man, this one is fucked, using time against you, with sleep being needed eventually, so at some point you will fall into the spikes of the Iron Maiden. And last, but certainly not least, the brass ball, a device in which its first victim was its creator itself, which is true by the way, look it up. The brass ball's first victim was its own creator, where the person he showed it to, the king of, I can't remember the exact country, his punishment for creating such a vile device was death by it, which fair enough.
The traitor did not know what to think of the brass ball, but as he was forced to enter it, only when the heat of fire began to scorch his skin and cook his flesh did he realize it was his tomb. His screams of pain echoed inside the brass chamber and traveled through the complex instrument which was the ball's head. Outside, the men could hear the brazen ball bellow. It literally makes a cow noise.
With all 6 pieces of the orb now collected, we can now return to the cistern to repair the orb, to remove the barrier blocking our path. Heading to the cistern, we...
What the fuck me? Jesus, that quick.
And they take us to jail. So now we have to break our way out. Breaking out of jail, using notes from previous prisoners to figure our way out, and exiting the prison cells. But the Shadow makes one last attempt at catching us, the person with all 6 pieces of the orb. But escaping it, we can find yet another diary entry from Daniel at the entrance to the chancel from earlier, which gives us a flashback to a scene which tells us that people they were torturing were not exactly who Alexander was saying they were.
1839. Tonight, we will unlock the power of the orb and ultimately banish the Shadow hunting me. I feel it closing in on me, and I fear for my life more than ever. Just outside Altstadt lies a small settlement where Zimmerman, a dairy farmer, lives with his wife and 3 children. We took the coach, went there. Our visit was unexpected, and Alexander was able to strike Zimmerman down without alerting the others. As he went to take care of the farmhands, I began to look for the children. We should have more than enough prisoners to finish the ritual now.
They went to a dairy farm and took the entire family. Honest people they kidnapped, people who committed no crimes whatsoever, and they tortured them to farm vitae out of them for the ritual, even taking the children of the farm as well. Recovering from our panic attack after realizing what Daniel has actually done, remembering the horrible memory that he wanted to forget, we head back to the chancel, finding a small lab which allows us to create the tonic needed to free Agrippa, which we then make and then feed to him, and then we need to cut his head off to take him with us. Heading to the chancel, we get the last set of quotes that we will get, titled Girl. They detail the events that we saw at the farm, with Daniel kidnapping a girl, believing that she was a true villain and deserved to die, and even Alexander saw that Daniel was becoming a monster, wanting to just kill the girl just to save his own life, to give him a few more minutes of life. Daniel had truly become a monster, and Alexander knew that he could no longer trust Daniel to do what he needed. Once Daniel killed the girl, it completely broke him. Daniel believed himself to be a good man before this, caring for his sister and believing only bad deeds could be done by those he viewed as bad, like his childhood bully, but he, someone he viewed as a good man, committed an unspeakable act, killing an innocent girl for no real gain at all. And after this point, he realized he wanted revenge on the man who made him become what he is. He wanted to kill Alexander, blaming him for everything he ever did. But the thing is Alexander wrong? Alexander was not the person that made Daniel do any of this. Daniel could very easily refuse to do this and just live on the run for the rest of his life. But Alexander convinced him to do it and basically manipulated him into doing it. But Daniel still was a man who could choose what he wanted to do. He was the one that tortured these people. He was the one that killed that girl. So he can't blame Alexander entirely. Entering the chancel, we head to the barrier and assemble the ball, but we need to disable the machinery. So we head back to the control room, finding the penultimate diary entry titled Downfall.
18th of August, 1839. I cannot believe what I have become. One of the girls escaped and I chased after her all the way upstairs. I hunted her down, and what is a life worth? How many lives can I take before I surrender my own? Sure, I would kill a murderer to save an innocent, but to kill an innocent, to save myself? A cold-blooded murderer.
Daniel, now questioning what made his life more valuable than the girl he killed, now sees himself as a murderer, killing the innocent girl. He is no different from this shadow he fears so much, chasing people and killing anyone who comes across his way just to extend his own life, because he believes that he deserves to live longer than he actually should be. Heading down to the machine room, we jam the cogwheels, disabling the machine, and head back to the barrier, in which we can now enter the inner sanctum, with the door adorned with the Order of the Black Eagle crest. Inside one of the rooms, we find Daniel's final diary entry, titled Revenge.
19th of August, 1839. It's not fair. I'm not to blame. I've been manipulated by that demon. He played my guilty conscience and duped me into facing the shadow alone. That vile, conspiring man. He expects me to meet my death as he steals power beyond imagination. Alexander, I will kill you for what you have done. If only the shadow had caught me in London or Algeria, I wouldn't have to suffer this humiliation. You made me a murderer, a monster. And now I merely await my death. I am too weak to press on. I can hardly stand as my knees fail me. I cannot see as my eyes are dressed in tears. I am as broken as the men I've tortured. If only I could wipe my fear away, as we did with them.
Daniel, so consumed by his actions and unable to accept what he did, blames Alexander entirely for his actions and vows revenge on him, now realizing he was being used by Alexander just so he could farm vitae for his ritual, all the while leaving him with a shadow, never fixing the initial problem Daniel went to him with. And the last line, Daniel wishes he could wipe away the fears and memories of what he did, so he could get up and face Alexander and not be burdened by the memories that he inflicted upon himself. If only he could forget what he did, like he did with all his victims. Yes, Daniel drank the Amnesia tonic to forget absolutely everything he did, to face Alexander more easily without being crippled by his guilty consciousness, showing a cowardly person who will not be able to stand up to what he did, even if he does beat Alexander. And with all diary entries, we get the full picture of Daniel's story, and we understand what Daniel did now. Now, doing a simple sacrificial ritual, we open a door with all the memories returning. We fall to the floor, but get back up.
I was wondering if you were going to show up. I see Agrippa convinced you to run some errands. Tell me, is everything nice and clear now? Am I the villain? Good and evil. Such comforting concepts, but hardly applicable. Are you so blind that you see no good in me or evil in Agrippa?
So here at the end we have a decision to make with the 3 endings of the game now coming into play. Either you choose the revenge ending, the bad ending, or the good ending. Let's start with the revenge ending. For the revenge ending, Daniel topples the 3 pillars that we see, disrupting Alexander's ritual, preventing him from opening the portal. With the ground shaking, the shadow then consumes Alexander and dissolves him into a blue mist. The same mist that we saw from the orb when we first discovered it in the tomb. Killing Alexander, the shadow seemingly leaves Daniel alone and cuts to a cutscene of Daniel leaving the castle.
It was my greatest triumph, and I never looked back. You think I was afraid, fleeing Brennenburg? Huh. Quite the contrary. I knew it was my purgatory, hellfire made to wash away my sins. There's no denying the things I've done, but I have paid my tribute. I gave them that awful man. I did the right thing.
Daniel has done some terrible things, truly, but he did something about it, confronting the man who manipulated him into doing these things and gave him the ability to do it, paying his price of admission to be allowed on the road of redemption. He hasn't redeemed himself yet, he will spend the rest of his life walking this road, but I think this action allows him to start the journey to redemption, and only God himself can judge if Daniel truly ever will redeem himself. And the question should be asked, can the actions that Daniel did be redeemed? Can the torture of countless peoples due to him fearing for his life be redeemed? In my opinion, no. I don't think Daniel should ever be redeemed. But that's kind of the question, and that's what these endings lead into. Who deserves to live here? Next is the Alexander ending. Basically, just listen to Alexander waffle on and let him complete the ritual, entering the portal in the end. Once Alexander is transported to the other side, Daniel will hear the many prisoners and people he tortured, and eventually he is killed by the shadow as it slowly invades the room.
Thank you, my friend. Your sacrifice won't be forgotten. You will be celebrated forever.
Alexander now gets his happy ending, being reunited with the one that he loved, due to Daniel not taking the initiative and trying to get onto the road of redemption by getting revenge on Alexander. This ending can also be triggered in these cells when you get taken by the gatherers if you don't do anything to escape. And the last ending is the good ending, or Agrippa's ending. Basically, when the portal opens, throw Agrippa's head into it, and basically the portal closes because only one person can go through it. This ruins Alexander's plan, and the room now starts to be consumed by the shadow again, and both Alexander and Daniel are taken, but we get to hear Agrippa again.
There he is. Do you see him, Vaya? He deserves so much more. Please, help him. I know you can. Don't worry, Daniel. It will be all right.
It seems Johann and Agrippa want to save Daniel, knowing that he doesn't deserve the fate that fell upon him, and then the screen fades to white, and then black, and then that's it, the end. We don't know exactly what happens in this ending, but we can kind of interpret it. We can assume that potentially Daniel was revived and taken to the other world, which would be seen by the white light. We know the beings from this world are above our comprehension, things like the Shadow and the Karnak, beasts that we don't understand and cannot physically see. Even the person from this place, Alexander, had to take a human form for us to comprehend him, so potentially the white light means that we just cannot comprehend it, and it is meant to show that transition. The fade to black, I think, is more Daniel's physical body in our world, or the real world I guess, dies, but he does move on to where Agrippa and Johann. Now while they are each labelled good, bad and revenge endings respectively, what do they actually mean, and are they good, bad and revenge endings? Well, I think these titles are a bit misleading in general. Each of these three characters, Agrippa, Alexander and Daniel, all three of them have done despicable things which can be viewed as bad and good. Some are sympathetic, for example, Daniel fears for his life due to the shadow that's chasing him, and Alexander wants to return home from where he came and be reunited with his one true love. But they both have done despicable things. Even Agrippa, a man who doesn't seemingly do a lot, but he did this ritual before, which we can assume meant he also tortured a bunch of people. All three of these characters are extremely selfish in their own ways, and the endings is very much who you believe deserves to get that good ending. Does Agrippa deserve it? Does Alexander deserve it? Or does Daniel deserve the ability to try redeem himself? None of them are, in my opinion, good or bad endings. It's all just determining of who you think is truly the evil person here. Is it the person that manipulates others to try achieve his full goal of returning home, or is it the man who used another person who was so desperate to be reunited with his love that he basically manipulated him and basically played him for a fool? Or is it the man so filled with rage from this action that he then manipulated another man into killing a bunch of people? Or is it the man who was manipulated and killed a bunch of people? It's a complex question that there is no right or wrong answer, and I don't even have an answer for it. I don't know who's right and who's wrong, who deserves to live and who deserves to die. It's your choice at the end of the day, and I think that's the beautiful part about Amnesia's ending. You can pick all three of them and none of them really change anything. Each of them result in the same sort of ending. I personally believe even in the revenge ending, Daniel will eventually die. We know the shadow is pushed back when a person dies. It killing Alexander pushes it back temporarily, but I do think it will return to get Daniel. The good ending is the one that seemingly is the best one, with Daniel being laid to rest with a bit of dignity and Agrippa potentially allowing him to move into the other world. But a question you might have is, what is this other world? We don't really learn anything about it, and we can only really interpret what it is. I interpreted it as some sort of other dimensional place, potentially a higher place which we cannot comprehend, a higher plane of existence, if you will, which the shadow is from, which the orb is from, which the Karnak, all the things that we can't comprehend are from. This then also links back to the point of the man who points out that Daniel is nothing but a man and kind of distinguishes Alexander from him, almost as if he saw Alexander for who he truly was, a beast or a thing that does not belong on this earth. In the end though, Daniel is not a good man, or a bad man in fact. He is just a normal person like anyone else. He feared death. He did good things in his life, he did bad things in his life, and he did despicable things in his life. In his past, he isn't a perfect being. He was manipulated by another person into doing something else that he believed he needed to do to survive. He played him for a fool, but should we feel sorry for him? And should we feel sorry for what happens to Daniel? No, but should he be prevented from walking that path of redemption due to his past transgressions? Should we shut him out and prevent him from growing from what he did in the past? I also believe no. I think Daniel should be allowed to walk that road of redemption and potentially make a better person of himself, and hopefully right the wrongs of the past, which cannot be righted, but hopefully Daniel can reach a point where he can balance out his good and bad things that he's done for the world. He will spend the rest of his life atoning for it, but maybe one day he will reach a point where he was overall a better force for good than bad. Alexander is a fascinating character to me. He seemingly was banished from wherever he came from and spent hundreds of years trying to find a way back to his love, with the only way he could find involved the torture of living creatures. So can we blame him for doing what he did? We understand his reasoning and why he so desperately wanted to be it. He didn't belong in this world. He belonged in another dimension. And he isn't human. He doesn't have the same values as you, me, Tom, Dick, or Stacy. He's different. So can we blame him for doing what he did? He only saw one way to fix what was wrong in his life, and he was so desperate to to reach this goal, he would do it. And then Agrippa then helped Alexander with the portal, which we can then assume that meant they tortured more people. With Johann Weyer, the character that talked about, he went through the portal, which betrayed Alexander, and the portal closed, which then led to Agrippa being captured by Alexander and tortured to the state that we find him as, the husk of a man that he once was. Even Agrippa's friendly attitude that we get, which some people just see him as a friendly little guy, could be him playing Daniel for a fool. There was no guarantee that Agrippa was going to save us. The ending does sort of spell out that Agrippa and Johann did help Daniel in the end, but what if he just didn't? What if we throw his head through the portal and reunite him with Johann, and he just didn't do anything to help us? He just let us die, and that was it. He moved on with his life, reaching that higher level of existence, being a man amongst gods, potentially. Agrippa's actions are interesting, and we understand why Alexander was so angry and so desperate to get the portal open as fast as possible. He did it once before and was basically taken from under his nose by two men who he viewed as lesser than him. He viewed humans as below him. But of course, you then question, why did they use innocent people? As I stated, innocent people probably allowed them to farm vitae much faster, but also I believe that potentially they ran out of prisoners and murderers and rapists and robbers and all sorts, because they had done the ritual twice now, so they needed to do it again. And Daniel did state that Wilhelm earlier stated that they kidnapped hundreds of people for these rituals, so potentially they killed thousands of people to open these portals that we just don't know about. Wilhelm was only a servant at one point who was killed because he wasn't very good at his job, so we don't know how many times Alexander attempted to actually open this portal. It really does spell out that he is a terrible being who just killed for a selfish reason. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a fascinating game to me. It is a game that obviously came out many years ago, and at the time it was viewed as an amazing horror game that utilized horror to its full extent. But does the game hold up all these years later when you compare it to the many horror games that we're getting now? Horror, especially in the indie scene, is sort of in its golden years, I think. We're getting so many great horror games, but when we look back, this game really did set the foundations for what makes horror games so special. While many horror games now focus on making you jump out your seat from jump scares every 5 minutes, Amnesia pulls back and uses its atmosphere masterfully. It ensures that you always feel on edge, and it utilizes that to the full effect. In fact, sometimes it makes the game feel worse, and sometimes you want it to make you jump out of your seat because you'd think it would make the game more fun. While I don't think Amnesia is the best horror game ever made, I do think it does deserve some respect on its name, and I think it's a shame that the franchise feels almost forgotten by modern gaming audiences. The most recent game, Amnesia: The Bunker, well, yes, it is definitely a great game, I don't think it made the impact I think it truly deserved to make on the genre itself. It feels like other games now are sort of playing the top spot, while Amnesia uses its old status of the top dog of the horror genre from the 2010s to try and make its way in, but I honestly don't think it can ever get to this point again. But even then, still, all these years later, Amnesia: The Dark Descent to me was one of the most interesting and unnerving games I've played in a long while. It's no secret with my channel, I've been playing a lot of horror games, and this is the first game I've played in a long time that kept me on the edge of my seat from start to finish, which I think it does fulfill the question I asked at the start of this video. It has held up all these years later as a good and effective horror experience. It makes you feel uncomfortable, it makes you feel scared, and it makes you feel disgusted with the actions you see on screen. So what the fuck is this game actually trying to say? Well, no matter how strong the mind is, evil will always leave a stain, one that festers in the shadows itself, creeping into every thought that you will ever have, every moment of your life. Daniel's actions haunt him, his regrets unraveling his sanity. But redemption is not about escaping the past that you did, it's about facing it and looking it in the eyes. True redemption is forged in suffering, carved into the soul of the condemned, and only those willing to walk through their darkness may find the light ahead. So keep your head up, and no matter how dark it gets, you might just miss the light that you need.
Evening, lads and lasses. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I know this was not the Walking Dead video. I'm planning on putting that entire video series on hold, not because of its performance, but because of real life stuff. We're planning on moving soon, real life, to somewhere else. So I need to basically a bit more fast with the videos. So The Walking Dead, I go a bit too in depth and they take longer to make, but hopefully I'll be able to make a lot more videos to get a backup. I'm making the videos at the same rate, but I'm delaying my uploads, so that's why it's gone from every week to bi-weekly. I would like to go back to weekly, but hey, life isn't fun like that. You gotta
make some sacrifices. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it was worth the wait. Again, thank you to all channel members, Tyler and Chelsea and Marty Morris. Your support is greatly appreciated, and yeah, thanks for watching, and that's enough waffling from me. See you around, Crocodile.